It's called. Oh, we're live now. Never mind.
Yeah, we're live. Let's do it at the end then. Okay, so I don't know, Miles, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining our early morning and late night LTS working group meeting on the 13th of July 2016. We have a couple different orders of business, but we're going to start off by talking about issue 111 from the LTS repo, which is managing floating V8 patches. We have Ali, Michael, and Francesca from the V8 team, and we're going to just discuss about how can we work together on managing floating how can we work together on avoiding floating patches and start having more official release lines from the V8 project that we can use for our LTS branches. And I guess I can maybe kick it off by just, Michael is the one who opened the thread. Do you have, some thoughts that you'd like to get us started on?
Yeah, sure. So we had a lot of internal discussion with Ali, Francisca, and so on, and also our info folks. What is the best way in order to unfloat? I don't know, how to handle the current floating patches in Node.js. And it boiled down essentially to two solutions, which one of them is, okay, what if we host the floating patches into the V8 repository? This means into a Chromium repository, like the V8 repository. Or what if we're going to fork a V8 repository on GitHub, and where you're going to land your floating patches? Did I miss anything, Ali?
No, that's pretty precise. So the objective note is that I think to help the node community manage the V8 branch in the LTS releases. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Michael, I don't think the V8 team itself plans to have a LTS release for V8.
We don't want to have a LTS release for V8. Currently it's just not on our plate. Just a possible.
So I guess the question really is, like, V8 team would like to help. What's the most meaningful way to help? And this is like one of the main ways that the help could be there in maintaining those floating patches. But the question is, what are the mechanics of maintaining those patches? Should those be on the V8 infrastructure, or whether they should be on the node infrastructure?
Right, and or I guess even possibly both, right? Because I could see that there might be some floating patches that wouldn't be common. So even if there was a place in the V8 to float most of them, there might be a few that would still be node specific. Is that?
But I think the idea is, if there's a node, I mean, this is to help support node. So if there's a node specific patch, the V8 doesn't care about that branch anymore because it's not stable branch anymore. It's abandoned from a Chromium point of view. So why shouldn't, like, if you're using V8 infrastructure, I think we would want to put that even node specific patch in the V8.
So you would basically be willing, anything that the node team wanted to land there could land there, is what you're saying.
Well, I guess within reason, anything might be too strong. But if we are going to use the V8 infrastructure or the Chromium infrastructure, then I would like to see that to happen. But I don't want to speak for the V8 team. I'm not on the V8 team, by the way. I work on Google Cloud.
So that's a very important distinction. So we need to be a little bit cautious here. Essentially, there is an overlap of 2 or 3 weeks when a V8 branch is still maintained, and it's, I think, active on the stable channel of Node at the same time, which might create some merge conflicts in the sense, okay, which might create some conflicts for accepting patches. This means we need to, in order to resolve them, we would need to create a separate branch for node whatever we are doing.
Right. Okay.
So this means that the branches are going to divert. Not everything, for example, which is going to accept it onto the node channel or node branch in a V8 repository is going to land in an official V8 branch which we are shipping over Chromium. Because, for example, there's some patches you are accepting on your early in your branching, which are features which we absolutely not going to accept in or going to ship on a very mature Chromium version.
Right. Okay. So are we talking about having a separate branch for node? Okay. So then.
So that's why then we thought even further. Okay, but why do we need to put them into our repository? Normally, you would resolve this problem with creating fork. Yeah, that got us thinking.
Okay.
So there's some notes from Ben Nordhaus that I think are interesting based on what we're talking about right now. So he was asking, if we're going to use Google's infrastructure, what time frame are we looking at? There's been some concerns about conflicting version numbers right now as we've been bumping patches.
Exactly.
And so, do you see any problems with that?
So let's start with the Google infrastructure. So currently Chrome, so Chromium has its own infrastructure team, which is developing its own infrastructure, which is open source. So keep in mind they are accommodating Chromium's release cycle. This means they are deprecating a lot and they have a high cadence. And this means infrastructure code which is 1 year old or test code which is 1 year old probably is not going to work in nowadays infrastructure. So taking into account that a Node LTS release is essentially using a V8 version which can be up to 3 years old, this means in order to really support the whole range of an LTS release of nodes in our infrastructure, this means we're going to need to introduce an LTS release of our infrastructure, which, let's say, is a little bit difficult and cumbersome. And yeah, so there are a lot of hurdles there.
Would it be easier to port maintain the test code from V8 in such a way that it keeps up to the major changes that are necessary to run it on the V8 API? Would it be possible to backport that without obviously backporting all the tests, because there'll be tests for new features and stuff?
Yeah, it's not even about tests that much. It's pretty about the infrastructure. For example, last year we started introducing sharding. So we are swarming. So we are automatically separating and distributing the tests over multiple bots in order to improve our test cycle. This, for example, there is no infrastructure code in a V8 version which is 1 year old. And this means that V8 version will not run on nowadays infrastructure.
Right. We backport similar stuff for our own tests to. I'm not sure how much overhead that would be. That's just sort of like what I'm wondering. Is that like in any way manageable or not? Yeah,
exactly. So that's what I meant. So this is a big if and big uncertainty.
So there's a significant amount of Chromium infrastructure that I think the V8 team leans on, for things like swarming, which are being rolled out, I think, on a Chromium-wide basis, not just for V8. So yeah. I think it's going to be pretty difficult to be able to make sure that all the new sort of build infrastructure changes continue to function for a release branch that's 30 months old, because that's not something that Chromium does today.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, in terms of running the tests, like, are you going to be? What about other people who want to check out the V8 source tree and run those tests who may not have, things like sharding and whatever, and just want to run it on a single machine?
You can run them locally, but we cannot run them currently on our Chromium infrastructure.
Okay, so the infrastructure it's not that you've done anything to prevent people from running it a different way, just that the infrastructure won't run them that way.
Yeah, so when you check it out, obviously you can run the test locally with the checkout. That should work, would be surprised if not. But our whole infrastructure, it's tuned for Chromium's release cycle.
Right.
We are deprecating, we are evolving a lot, and now accepting guaranteeing an LTS, building and testing an LTS branch on essentially Chromium's infrastructure means Chromium infrastructure needs to introduce an LTS release themselves, because they need to guarantee that all their old tests run on their infrastructure, which currently is absolutely not the case. And yeah.
So I guess building on that, and this is the next point from Bed Nordhaus, we have the infrastructure set up to build our own versions in our LTS, and that works. And Michael Dawson had done some fantastic work on getting the V8 test suite running, and so we can now run the V8 test suite against V4 and V6. So perhaps there's some sort of intermediate step here where I know that there's a waterfall release process, and so I guess the question is there a way to make that waterfall include our infrastructure for building and testing, but still allow the release to go through the Chromium release streams?
I'm not sure what benefit you would get out of it. Why do we need Chromium's release channels, and what?
Yeah, I think the two benefits I was understanding that we would get would be not from one is additional review from the V8 team,
Okay.
and leveraging the infrastructure. Those were the two things that we thought and I think you're right that once we move to our own infrastructure, pushing it back to branches in Chromium, at least I don't see what extra that would add, unless it was going to be shared with other projects. But it sounds like that's not a goal here. So.
Yeah, exactly. So probably also with the reviews, it makes more sense when we try to reroute them through GitHub or something like that, or set up a system that works. But we shouldn't base the whole decision on how you get reviews for code patches.
Yeah, I guess my main thought process on the release channels was working towards Node being able to be a shared library. So if there's an official release channel of our LTS release, then various Linux maintainers or other people who are setting things up could have that release channel installed locally and not have to have it vendored by us.
Okay, so you mean that Chromium is going to host the release channel for Node?
I'm thinking at a high level here, but it may not really be possible or beneficial to do it.
And I don't think it's quite possible because the version of V8, I mean, if you look at the LTS branch, we do have patches. We do diverge from a vanilla V8. So I don't see that as being very practical. I don't think you can take a vanilla V8 from somewhere and easily integrate with it with a Node LTS version, because you'll be missing things.
Yeah.
I think it has to be rendered in.
So Ale and me and I did go over a list of some of the floating patches, and then checked if this is something we would accept in an official V8 release at that point and stuff like that. So especially the patched in features were a red flag.
Right. So on the infrastructure side, we have done work to get some of the to get the V8 tests running on some platforms. We haven't completely covered that, in that we don't have ARM, we don't have Windows. So that's that still would be a benefit if we could leverage the infrastructure that you have. But it sounds like, I mean, it's basically what I'm hearing, that you think that's not a feasible option.
it's not a feasible option, especially considering that there is a 30-month lifetime of LTS release. So it works, for example, for 1 month, 2 months after we abandon a branch, probably because that means probably the infrastructure is still okay and can work with that. Yeah, but the older the branch gets, the more deprecated the infrastructure code behind it is going to be.
Is there a list somewhere of all platforms that the infrastructure runs on? It'd be interesting to see how much we already have covered.
You can have a look at our waterfall, for example, if you have the link. Yeah, I can send the link afterwards or add it to the meeting notes. I only have the internal link for the internal builders.
The other thing to note is that some of the platforms run simulated only, so it's not quite the same as what we have. Like PPC and Linux One are both simulated. I'm not sure about MIPS. I'm guessing it might be native, but
yeah, we're running ARM simulated, I think. Maybe MIPS is native. The PPC thing is simulated, but I think the people who are maintaining the PPC port, for example, are running separate builders on their infrastructure.
Yeah, that's my team, so yes.
So yes.
The only I'm probably mistaken here, but the big platform that we don't have is we don't have MIPS platform hardware at all.
But I don't know that Node supports it yet, right? So.
Well, we don't officially support it, but there's been people asking it for it, like over the years for a long time. There's a lot of people that want to run Node.js on weird small devices, routers. Scary.
But it's sort of, I mean, it sounds like it's just not an option to run on the Google infrastructure. Like it is. I'm just wondering, like, is it worth talking more about it, or is it that cut and dried?
So my impression is it makes more sense to not think about how we can leverage the existing test infrastructure we have. Maybe it makes sense to talk more about how we can assist you, and maybe also, I mean, for example, for MIPS, maybe it makes sense that we supply you with some bots, something in that direction.
Right, okay.
So what about for reviewing patches then? Is that something we can just get like a better way to loop V8 people into when we're doing our patching process for evaluating a patch that should land, or like, what are the ideas there?
Pardon, I didn't get the question.
So for reviewing patches, or helping to review patches that we will be floating on V8, what's the best option there? Or what are the ideas?
So there's the problem of reviewing patches, but there's another problem of just bookkeeping, trying to figure out what needs to be floated, what needs to be merged where. And that's getting to be pretty cumbersome as well. I mean, we do a lot of floating patches on V8 in our repository, and it's a dependency, and it just gets cumbersome to maintain patches for a dependency in your own branch. So I think one alternative to look at would be to have so vendor in V8 not from directly upstream in the Chromium repository, but have an intermediate V8 fork that will only contain the patches we want on top of the official V8 branches, and pull that one into Node. And that's the second alternative that Michael has in issue 111.
Yep.
And the benefit was going to be that there's going to be no noise on that repository and no bookkeeping overhead in trying to figure out what needs to be merged where. It would be just V8 plus all the patches that Node needs. So reviewing gets much easier.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that approach?
Jeremiah, did Ben have any notes on that?
On which?
On the suggestion of a separate V8 repo, even if it's being pulled, like it's basically would be like a node.js / V8 repo, which we would land changes in, and then I guess periodically that would be updated into the node levels, right?
Okay. I don't know where you got the notes from Ben from, so I have no
Okay.
idea.
Sorry, I thought you'd mentioned that you were looking at them. Maybe that was Miles.
That was me. I'm posting a link into the chat. It was at the
Yeah.
end of the LTS working group. I was in the managing floating patches thread. Yeah, his note mostly just ended. It was just about like if it was going to be inconvenient to use the Google infrastructure that we could use our own, but there wasn't any discussion about another repo.
Okay.
Yeah, the repo here was introduced in the original post.
So I guess it would be that, Ali, if like people could subscribe to that repo to see what was going on more easily. Is that the?
Correct. I mean, we can loop in the V8 team for reviews on that, and from my point of view, I end up doing a lot of merging on the depths V8
Yeah.
directory, and it's very hard to keep track of what still needs to be backported and how does it need to be backported. So it would be easier and cleaner from the node point of view that we are just rolling the dependency. So we're picking up node 5.1.281.500, let's say, as opposed to picking up a new version of V8 and then cherry picking some commits from elsewhere.
Okay, because it would be more because it's a direct fork. It makes the mechanics easier.
Correct. I mean, it would be a very simple process to update V8 inside the LTS branch.
Won't you just have the same problem on the other repo, though?
Less so because I mean there's less noise on the other repo, in the sense that it's only floating patches that repo is going to be accepting on the LTS branch.
I think maybe Jeremiah was thinking once you then have to move from the new V8 to the node one. But I could see, shouldn't that just then be a direct copy? Like you take everything from the V8 branch as opposed to like cherry picking things. It's like just move everything.
Correct. I think it would be a direct copy, and ideally I think it should be a like an automated process. I mean the tip of the tree on the LTS branch in the V8 fork should be automatically updated into Node.
Right.
You
Like
don't need to manually pull it in. If there's a new version, just you should pull it.
Yeah, something like an LKGR or something like that. Yeah. We're doing
the only thing
similar
about
thing.
that is maybe testing, right?
Yes, but probably it's easier for to reuse the already existing node infrastructure with GitHub.
Yeah, no, I meant like the testing thing was if you automate it, you want to make sure that it only actually pushes it if you run all the node tests and it doesn't fall over, right?
Right. So the basic idea would be, so right now we run the V8 tests and we use it as a signal. I think I think a commit to the V8 fork could be followed on by a V8 test run and an optional flag that basically says if it passes, then push it to the main node repo.
Right. It would, but that V8 test run is only validating V8. We'd also need a node test run that says things are good as well.
Correct.
So it's almost like you'd have to create a pull request, run the existing automated tests, and if that's okay, then have it automatically push. And then we probably change. Then we could probably change the testing to, although I don't know if we'd want to remove the existing one, but like we'd want tests that would test from the V8 tree, because in the fork that's all we'd have as opposed to what's in the node. So just run the tests in the normal V8 way.
Correct, and I think that so that would make things easier even for the tests as well, because we're not trying to run them in a sort of semi-Frankenstein state. We're running them in a original pristine state.
Yeah, plus the floating patches. So, but yeah, I don't know. There still might be value to the semi-Frankenstein since that's what we ship, right? But I think that's a separate issue anyway. So
yeah, I don't know. I think I mean, we should not. I mean, if we are not making any changes between the fork and the official node repository, then I think that should really be the goal. That there's no changes that we make in the main repo.
yeah, I guess if it's a strict copy, I guess, and it's built exactly the same way. So you said you do lots of the changes. It's like, I think if we get consensus from all the people who do the bulk of the V8 changes, that's easier. It sounds good to me. But we probably need them to chime in as well. Like, I think like it'd be good to get Ben in agreement that says, yeah, that would make his life easier. And I don't know, are there some other key people that you see Ali doing, like doing new versions of V8 and that stuff?
I think Targosh does a lot of the V8 branch maintenance as well. And I agree. It has to be something that provides value. So there's two things we're talking about, right? Being able to loop in the V8 team more easily to get help on the reviews, and the second thing is making it easier to actually manage those branches over a long term. So the separate repos, we should get other people's buy-in in that as well.
In terms of the
really
review,
just the three of you that probably need to sign off on that, and I don't imagine that'd be controversial at all, but worth getting that.
in terms of getting the the V8 team involved in the reviews, what do you have in mind once that say that repo exists? Do you have in mind a process or flow or whatever for how that happens then?
So currently, specific process, no. One, for example, would work. We either go through some key people which going to facilitate the reviews inside of the team, or maybe simply seeing people on a specific issue, on a specific pull request for inside the fork. So also one benefit when you have a separate fork of V8 on GitHub is that you don't get the noise from all the other issues in there. So it's easier for a few key people to keep an eye on the merge requests and stuff like that, or review requests.
Right. I guess I'm just trying to get a feel for, like, from the V8 team, what are you guys sort of planning to step up to? Like, would you say, okay, yeah, if you we'll keep an eye on the flow there and we'll comment on things we think are appropriate, or that we'd need to ask for specific reviews on particular ones, or?
I think that's going to evolve organically. We see how it works out. I think that makes most sense. Currently, I think most of the stuff is going either through me or through Ali. So Ali is handling most of the backports. So we can start with that and then see if it makes sense to going directly or contacting directly people.
So Jochen has been starting to get involved in some of the reviews as well. He's been providing feedback on other issues. We've pinged other people who are more relevant for GC related issues. Uh, the part of the problem is that doing this on the main node repo is it's not going to be very fruitful because there's a lot of noise on the main repo, and looking at the history of a particular V8 branch is very cumbersome, right? Um, so it's unknown to most people on the V8 team what exactly has been merged back on this branch. At least the history would be crisper to look at on the other side. So maybe that would help, and it would make it easier for the V8 team to review patches and for us to be able to pull in the appropriate people from the V8 side for reviewing patches. When we're talking about merges, usually it's something that's already been sort of implemented by an appropriate person in the VA team. So, for example, if it's a GC fix, somebody on the GC team has either implemented or reviewed that already. So merging it is a process of whether it's a determination on whether it makes sense to backport it or not to this particular V8 branch. In some cases, you end up with a scenario where it doesn't apply cleanly, and you basically have to modify the patch somehow. So that's a case where I would imagine that we would want to ping specific people to review that, or modification of the patch still makes sense.
Right. Okay. It's pretty obvious to ask. I'm just thinking if there's a way that, like, if you're doing it, it's obvious that you have the contacts. If somebody else was doing it, would they, can we set it up so they know who to or how to basically make the request to get that person to review it?
I think the suggestion from Michael Havlich was a good one. That let's start with a few gatekeepers who can add people, appropriate people for review. I think uh, that may be the best approach to start with.
Right. Okay. So you would look. Somebody else does one. You or Michael would notice it and say, okay, I'm going to add on these extra reviewers.
You, yeah.
Okay. I'd say from my perspective, it sounds completely reasonable. I don't know if anybody else are there people with concerns, objections to that kind of flow?
No objections from here.
So who's going to write this up as an issue or in the existing issue?
I can take a stab at it.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like as long as we do that and then get, you said there's like 3 key people we should just get to sign off on it. Sounds like the way to go. Anything more we should discuss on this topic?
think that's it as far as I can tell for right now. I think if, Ali comes in with a proposal and then we can talk about that in the thread and, we can maybe all have one more meeting just before we finalize it. But I think that sounds good for now to me.
Okay, so Miles, what's the next issue on the agenda?
Thank you, everyone from the V8 team for joining. Feel free to stick on the call if you'd like. We have a few other things to talk about, but we won't be heartbroken if you decide to move on. So we have two more things to talk about. They're mostly around v4.5. There is an issue number 120. I'll post the link so people can get to it easily, which is just a list of Semver minor commits that are currently sitting in v4.5 staging. Most of them had been agreed upon, but some of them were staged. I wanted to just test them out, but they need to be agreed upon. So if you can look at the list, just to kind of go through it, we have the changes to buffer with the new buffer API that have been added. Those two are in there right now. There's the buffer zero fill backport, which is the CLI option that James backported. We have the Intel vTune profiling, which had been agreed upon a while back. I think this is probably the same thing that had raised flags at the V8 team, so maybe that deserves some, other discussion. There's the commits that are around getting the V8 test runner working in 4.5 and the V4 branch in general, and then another commit around having more post-mortem data exposed by V8. Those have all been agreed upon. Before we move forward, does anyone have any thoughts or problems with what we currently have exposed? I mean, what we currently have on the list there?
The vTune profiling stuff does not seem to touch V8.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
I was just saying that the vTune profiling commit does not appear to touch V8, so I don't think that's a problem.
Okay. Never mind then. Oh, that's just in our own build. Okay, so then data that's touching V8. Okay, I'll take the general silence as an agreement on that. And so now the part that needs a little bit more attention, we've got two Semver minor commits sitting there that have not been agreed upon and can be easily backed out. The first being copying tabs shouldn't trigger completion. This is something for the REPL, where essentially if you, when you're copying tab indented code into the REPL right now calls the tab completion function when there's no pressing of the button. So this came in as a Semver minor. It seemed to me like kind of unexpected behavior. So it was something that I thought would be appropriate to backport so we could have, similar behavior between our REPLs. Any thoughts on that?
Probably land that.
I'm just having a quick look.
Is there a risk of, just wondering what the risk side of things is? Is there any downside to, somebody has something that is automating using the REPL that might affect, or?
So I believe, and I'd have to dig in a bit more, but this is like specifically when something is pasted into the REPL. But I'm look in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it's when you paste in tabs in copied code from elsewhere to try it.
I was more around like this. I don't know enough about the REPL usage. Like, if it's all some human doing it, then it seems like if it's a little different, that won't affect anybody seriously. If there's some people who somehow use it through automation.
There are other programs that use it, but it's usually in a human-facing manner, as far as I know. I haven't heard of anything that uses it automatically. Could be something. Um, whatever that is probably won't work with this anyways. I
I
believe
honestly
this
can't
was.
imagine it a non-human use for tab completion.
I think this was marked somewhere minor because.
It changed the interface of emit key press events. It adds option
Right.
Interface.
argument.
Yeah, look, I don't see a big risk here. I think you're right. Yeah, copy and pasted input shouldn't do this, and it should be consistent across versions if we can. I'm +1 on backporting this one.
Cool. So the next one that we have is, and Michael, are you okay with it too?
Yep. I've heard that we don't think it's going to be an issue, so good.
Cool. So the other one that we have is fixed linking for shared libraries. It's add node free environment public API. This is issue 3098. I'll post this into a thread. So Ben had a comment on this. He's okay with landing the node free environment change. He'd been in favor as opposed to just okay if he knew there were actual users, as Electron doesn't use v4.x, and I think that this was Electron related in the first place. So I wasn't super in-depth on this, so if anyone knows more, this just seemed, again, a similar thing, just like fixing behavior to be similar between our release lines with not a very large probability of causing breakages.
Does anyone know what version of Node WebKit runs?
I think they're on the latest as well. They're pretty. They have to keep up to date as like Electron.
This is pretty much only an addition anyway, so I don't see how it could hurt anybody, right?
Yeah,
No,
but did we actually want to take it?
Yeah, that's the question. I don't think there's any risk here. It's just a matter of, is this going to actually help anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, I guess, similar to some of the other stuff, which was like on the line of like whether or not this is like a features for feature's sake, or if it is actually improving the stability of LTS.
Look,
So,
I actually think I'm leaning on the +1 side to this simply because it does support embedding use cases, and we do want to support embedders of LTS. There are lots of use cases of LTS like out there, and we don't want to be constantly pushing people towards the newer versions if we can help it. So, given that it's low risk, even though I can't see obvious users that would benefit from it now, I can imagine down the track there might be, unless we want to wait for them to come back, but it's on our plate now, so maybe it's not that big deal.
yeah,
I'm gonna have to go on.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's also worth mentioning, I'm not 100% on this, but I have a feeling like, other than for security reasons, this could very likely be the last minor bump on v4. There aren't, like we had a handful of things that due to various security releases, we've had sitting kind of waiting to be landed for a while. So I took the time on Monday to kind of like review a whole bunch of stuff, and these were the ones that came up as like, as issues to look at. There are other Semver minor stuff that have not been reviewed, but again, no one has put these up as like, hey, we need these in LTS, so I haven't really gone stretching for things that, aren't necessary.
Right. I'm definitely not against this. I would like to point out that embedders will have the easiest time patching something like this if they need it. But I think it's probably good for us to have something like have these things because like that tells users like we care about them.
Mm-hmm. I'm personally +1 on it. Rod
Yep.
and Michael?
Yeah, no issue. So +1.
Okay, excellent. So that was easy. We are now through all those. I will update that issue. We have one more item on the agenda, which is one more Semver minor that Ben had asked us to discuss. This one does have potential implications. It's exporting OpenSSL symbols on Windows. I'm going to paste the link in here. It's number 7676. This is a very recent change and part of a couple other changes, so I don't think that this is something that we would even look at landing immediately, but something that we could consider for a future release. Actually, you know what? My mistake. This had landed previously in number 7608, which also was only about 5 days ago. So it's still pretty new, but it seems that this is a problem that people have been having in LTS. But yeah, there is the possibility that it could cause add-on breakages, which, in my opinion, can make it, easy to just decide no on that.
That's a big red flag.
Oh, can it cause add-on breakages?
There,
Just exporting new symbols.
so in the issue, Ben mentions is that there was at least one report of add-on breakages caused by exporting OpenSSL symbols, although that was arguably more of an issue with the add-on and the way the add-on was written. But that's still kind of, whether or not we want to say people wrote it right or wrong, I don't know that we want to potentially be having those breakages.
No, I think at this, once in LTS, it doesn't matter why you break them. It's important not to break people.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so actually I was a little off on the timing of things because I was looking at different issues. So there's the original add-on stuff came in April and landed in 6.3. But there's an old issue from the archive as old as September 2012 about Windows add-ons can't use the bundled OpenSSL.
Can you link that? I can't
Yeah.
find the issue that caused the original pull request from Ben.
So I just pasted the original issue that caused this, and then, so I'm just going through, and then here is, after that, that's the original pull request that this is backporting. Or at least the parts from Windows that fixes it comes from that. But this looks like a pretty old issue that, was only closed 8 days ago and has been opened for almost 4 years.
So this.
I mean, that means
this is. Sorry, this is backporting something that we've done in version 6 already?
Yeah, it lives in 6.3, it sounds like.
Does it? If it was merged 5 days ago, I'm not sure about that.
No, I was looking at the wrong thing that was merged 5. You know what, to be honest, maybe we just need Ben to talk about this because there's like so many threads going on here. It's hard to make complete sense of it. I think Ben would probably be able to do a better job of explaining it. So we can go back to taking this offline and get Ben to write kind of like a postmortem on this so we can make a better decision.
Yeah, I mean, I maintain these days. I maintain BigNum, the add-on. It's fairly popular for big number manipulation, and it uses OpenSSL. And on Windows, you have to have it installed in a particular location. I don't know whether this would help that situation or not. I wasn't aware that this had changed, so I need to go and investigate that. But if it does, I'm potentially interested in making this happen. I think maybe this is something to put on hold. Maybe not reject, but put it on hold until we have a clear call for it. Because doing it now might be just a bit preemptive. Because I imagine the situation might be if we've changed it in version 6 and onwards, then people might show up starting to say, hey, this thing works in version 6, but it doesn't in version 4. And if we start to hear that kind of thing, then we might want to reconsider it. So if we just put it on the table.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Like, I can imagine where it's breaking is like if people are having to do all sorts of like monkey patching to get the OpenSSL stuff working, then, it probably breaks once things work properly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess like also in the ecosystem, if it breaks in the ecosystem, people will have the opportunity to fix that upstream now, and then we'll hear about it. Okay. So I think that is it for issues that we have. One thing that would be really helpful if people could go through, I'm going to be updating the changelog to be, more human readable in the 4.5 release today. But if people could just review the commits in there and make sure that there's no red flags, there's quite a bit. Also, if people think that the backlog in there has become a little bit too unmanageable, we could very well split that into a patch release and then do the minor release afterwards, which I'm open to. We also have to, and Rod, maybe you can help with this. Right now, the changes to libuv are in there. And I believe, as we had discussed on the last meeting, that we would reach out to NPM and to other stakeholders to get them to aggressively test this. I was planning to draft a letter to the NPM team today, but perhaps we can discuss offline, like who are the other people that we should be like really leaning on. I've talked to Bryce over at NodeSource about this, but I think that extensive testing of this is really necessary to make sure that we don't cause problems for people.
Wait, so we're shipping what version of libuv in this?
1.9.0.
1.9.1 actually, and it also includes the backport of your fixes, Jeremiah, to make sure that the STD out stuff is not going to hit us again.
Both commits?
I believe so.
Okay, there should be a test commit and there should be the other one. And then wasn't there some other problem from libuv 1.8? Sorry, 1.9, or is that only because we started using real path from it?
I believe those problems were because we were using their native real path implementation.
Yeah, which we're not on version 4, so should be okay.
But again,
so
yeah.
I take it. I take it that smoke testing hasn't shown anything up.
No, smoke testing was completely green. I'm going to dig through and make sure that the flaky fails are not false positives, because the flaky list is non-trivial. I think there's like 4 or 5 flaky fails, so I'm going to audit that a little bit more today. But everything so far was green. But everything was green before we released V6, so that doesn't really make me feel much better.
Okay, well, when you're pushing on the release candidate, then we can do some marketing around that. Maybe flag this as an item to talk about at the CTC meeting today.
Okay.
Just to get more awareness of the need for greater testing.
Sure thing. I'll add the flag to that issue. Rod, Jeremiah quickly pasted in the link to the README redo. Is there anything you'd like to say about that quickly?
I really should get to bed, so probably not. I just like reviews on that. One of the reasons I did it was, I've been meaning to do it for a while, but I also wanted to. I need to get a blog post up about the end of version 5. That's been on my to-do list for a while, and getting a blog post up that describes our release process. I wanted to get that animated graphic in there. So that was one of the reasons I did it. So it's not urgent to get it in, but if people could put an eye over it and point out any concerns they have, that'd be helpful. And maybe we can talk about it at the next meeting if nothing else comes of that issue.
That's the only reason I posted in there. Just please review it if we have time. So.
Okay, excellent.
I'll try to make time for it because this stuff is stuff that people really rely on to understand our LTS stuff. So if it's clear, that'd be great.
Yeah. But I know it's a lot of text, so it's a lot of reviewing work. So I understand if people have trouble getting to it.
so I guess we can call it so, Rod can get to bed. It's late for you. Thank you to everyone who came early and everyone who came late. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Right. Take care, everyone.
Okay, thanks. I'll write up the notes and put a PR for those in the next day or two.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.